Welcome back. Mr. Clarke's back. Time to take a look at the Cold War and how it intensifies during the 1940s and 50s. Some of the objectives for this particular section will be how Cold War tensions intensified the arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. We'll look at new President Eisenhower's response to communism, which differed from that of Truman. We'll analyze the impact of the United States from significant international Cold War conflicts. And we'll look at how the Cold War impacts the space race. One, why did the Cold War balance of power shift on September 2nd, 1949? An American B-29 plane, as you see pictured there, detected radiation near Alaska. This was a clear indication that the Soviet Union had successfully tested their first atomic bomb. Two, how did the Soviet development of the atomic bomb in 1949 impact the Cold War? No longer could the United States use the atomic bomb as a deterrent against Soviet aggression. So previously the United States had the atomic bomb, so therefore we could threaten the Soviet Union and get them to back down. But now that we don't have that advantage, we no longer could do so. It also intensified the arms race as each country looked for an opportunity to develop a more devastating bomb. Three, how did President Truman react to the Soviet development of the A-bomb? Truman raised the stakes of the arms race, tasking the Atomic Energy Commission with the goal of developing the hydrogen bomb, which would be even more devastating than the A-bomb. Some predicted the hydrogen bomb could be more than 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb. So just picture that 75,000 people died in the initial atomic bomb drops on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you multiply that 1,000 times, potentially, I don't know whether that's 7.5 or 75 million people potentially who could die instantaneously. Four, why did scientists Robert Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein argue against the hydrogen bomb? Those two gentlemen being scientists, and obviously during World War II, the lead up to the atomic bomb development, that was to end a grand war, a big war. Here, they feared this would fuel a perpetual, like a nonstop arms race to develop a more devastating bomb. So as we move forward in the Cold War, different policies are emerging. The next one we're going to look at is mutually assured destruction, which is a doctrine that hopes to avoid war by the fear of catastrophic retaliation. So if you know that if you drop an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb or a nuke today on another country, they're going to drop it on your country as well. Well, you know that it's a mutually assured destruction on both sides. You might be able to destroy your enemy, but you also know your enemy can destroy you. So the question 5, the MAD argument or mutually assured destruction argument is that no country will use weapons of mass destruction against another country who has these weapons or may be supported by a country that has them for the fear of retaliation and mutual annihilation. Problems with MAD is the fact that these weapons could fall into the wrong hands, a terrorist group, or accidentally deployed. We could also have a dictator who doesn't really care about his own or her own people and therefore may use it against another country. Okay, now we're going to move on from Truman to Eisenhower. Why was Eisenhower's experience during World War II essential to his leadership during the Cold War? He knew firsthand the horrors of World War II, so he experienced those horrors, which made him quite a bit more cautious than somebody who maybe had not seen or used those type of weapons before. Eisenhower fought to protect world democracy, and he would look to preserve it as president. 7, who was John Foster Dulles? How did he impact the Cold War? He was the Secretary of State under Dwight Eisenhower. He helped to organize and coordinate the opening of the United Nations. He was strongly anti-communist, and he believed the United States must play a leadership role around the world. 8, compare and contrast Truman and Eisenhower's responses to Soviet aggression. How were they similar? How were they different? Similar in that both policies influenced the need to respond to Soviet aggression, yet reluctance to begin an all-out war. Differences. Truman's policy of limited war relied on carefully defined objectives, conventional warfare, and weapons. Eisenhower focused in on stockpiling nuclear weapons and building planes, missiles, and submarines. needed to deliver them because he assumed that any war that might break out would be an atomic or nuclear war, not conventional. 9, what were some benefits of Eisenhower's policy? What were some drawbacks? Well, the benefits of Eisenhower's policy would be to save money. In 1953, the defense budget was $50.5 billion. In 1955, it dropped down to $35.8 billion. Drawback of stockpiling nukes carried the danger of increasing rather than decreasing the chance of a war that would use weapons of mass destruction, and rather the risk of weakening conventional forces. Ten, how were the policies of massive retaliation and brinkmanship, how did they impact American foreign policy? When John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State, helped to convince Eisenhower of the merits of these policies. These are aggressive policies that said the United States would use weapons of mass destruction to attack adversaries. The United States would be willing to go to the brink of war to deter enemies. Dulles quote here in 1955, the ability to get to the very verge, the very brink of war is necessary. It's a necessary art or skill. If you are too scared to go to the brink, you are lost or finished. What happened on March 5, 1953 that destabilized the Cold War? So sometimes the enemy that you know is better than the one that you don't. So the uncertainty of a new leader in the Soviet Union created a lot of tension, both in the United States and around the world. Joseph Stalin died. He had led the Soviet Union for around 30 years or 3 decades. Nikita Khrushchev, pictured here, became the new leader of the Soviet Union. He was known as a tyrant. The United States knew Stalin pretty well. There was a lot of uneasiness about this new Soviet leader. You can see the Time magazine cover with a bomb exploding behind him. The threat of an all-out Third World War, or a world war that both sides used nukes, was becoming increasingly likely, especially when Khrushchev was quoted as saying, whether you like it or not, history's on our side. We will bury you. And he basically pointed a finger at the United States. 12, how did Eisenhower and Khrushchev's conflict on communism and the Cold War? Well, Eisenhower, he talked very strongly about rolling back communism, which was obviously seen as a threat to Khrushchev and the Soviet Union. He announced the United States would use force to help any Middle Eastern country threatened by communism. So in many ways, Eisenhower's expanding our big brother policy, our policy of looking out for countries directly into the Middle East. 14, how did events during the Cold War shape future developments in the Middle East? Well, one key area that remains a key area is the Suez Canal. It's a major thoroughfare or point of travel from Western Europe into the Middle East and Asia. So the struggle over the Suez Canal was significant because it showed increasingly the importance of oil. Oil in the 1940s, 50s, 60s is going to be very much the dominant issue in this region of the world and remains still a significant issue. And of course, Israel, which was established as a homeland for Jews after World War II, and this really angered a lot of Middle Eastern countries over the fight for the Holy Land in and around the city of Jerusalem. 13, what was the Eisenhower Doctrine? Eisenhower reaffirmed the Truman Doctrine, and he expanded it by applying it to the Middle East. He announced the United States would use force to help any Middle Eastern country which was threatened by communism. I think that's a little repetitive. 15, how did Eisenhower change the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA? His role, he expanded the role of the CIA. He believed that the United States should have more covert operations, meaning the United States should get involved secretively, dropping spies in and around the areas of interest around the world. In 1953, the United States CIA even helped to stage a coup, which is an overthrow of a government in Iran, as well as in Guatemala in 1954. There you can see the Central Intelligence Agency's shield. 16, why were Americans stunned on October 4th, 1957? The Soviet Union stepped ahead of the United States in the space race when they were the first nation to launch a satellite, Sputnik, into outer space. Americans feared that they were now losing the space race and falling behind overall in the Cold War. You can see the newspaper headline, "The Race to Space," on the left side there, and that's the image of Sputnik. Obviously, it's a computer-generated image there, or cartoon visual. '17, how did the United States attempt to improve education in the wake of the launch of Sputnik? Many Americans felt the reason why the Soviet Union had stepped ahead of the United States in the space race is because the Soviets were better with mathematics and science. So the United States Congress passed the NDEA, the National Defense Education Act. This would provide an additional $1 billion in federal funding for educational training, specifically in science and mathematics. Also, too, the United States created NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is a team that coordinate research in rocket science, technology, and space exploration. This is also important for the broader military, as development of missile technology could greatly impact the delivery system for atomic or nuclear weapons. This was a major step forward, the creation of NASA. We have huge NASA agencies in Cape Canaveral and Florida, along the east coast of Florida, as well as in Houston, Texas. List the key components of the space race. Develop rocket and missile technology to deliver weapons around the globe. Satellite technologies for spying and communication purposes. Obviously, satellite technologies provide a tremendous amount today with GPS, satellite radio, satellite TV, things like that. Goal to put the first astronauts on the moon, and the intimidation factor as well, to see which side was moving ahead. You can see NASA here. This is from Florida. That's how large the facility is. A good way to understand how big the facility is to look at the automobiles in the parking lot versus the size of the facility. That's where today they house the space shuttle and other rockets. They kind of get that prepped up in there, and they work on it under the cover of that facility. Lesson reflection: did the United States overestimate or underestimate the Soviet Union in the 1950s? The United States had a tendency to underestimate the Soviet Union. For example, the United States was surprised when the Soviets developed an atomic bomb and when the Soviets launched Sputnik. However, the United States felt threatened by the Soviet Union. They wanted to show its dominance. It responded to the Soviet threats by developing the hydrogen bomb and participating in the space race. So take a moment or two to get down anything you need to. Hopefully you enjoyed our look here at some of the ongoing events of the Cold War. As you know, the Cold War is going to last into the late 80s, early 90s, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 89, and ultimately the end of the Soviet Union and the Cold War in the early 90s. So we will be looking at the Cold War issues in the context of anything we study moving forward in history. So until next time, Mr. Clarke is out.